You're listening to Shoe In, covering the ins and outs of all things footwear, from sneakers to heels, loafers to slippers, and every type of shoe in between. Brought to you by the FDRA, the Footwear Industries Association focused on retail, trade, politics, and fashion, helping create and enhance conversations on all things footwear. And now your footwear insiders, Matt Priest and Andy Polk.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Shoe In Show. Today's episode is going to be focused on sustainability. It's a topic we've talked about a lot over the past several years, had a lot of different guests on, talk about product processes, things like that. But we're really excited that this year, even when we're all remotely working, we're doing a digital sustainability summit for the industry to really bring new ideas, bring best practices, bring tips in, that kicks off August 31st and goes through September the 4th. So I'm really excited about the opportunity to help different segments of the industry hear from leaders on what they're doing, how they're doing it, how everybody can raise the boat a little bit better on sustainability, become a little bit more eco-conscious, and just generally share ideas, which is what FDRA is really good at, right, Matt?
Yeah, I mean, we created this, 76 years ago, created this awesome platform where we come together and talk about issues and collective solutions. And what's really interesting, Andy, is that we, just think back in the last 18 months where we've really ramped up discussions around sustainability to be in line with and also surpass maybe where some of the brands are, just so we can be future thinkers. I kind of liken us to the two Bobs, Andy. We kind of mine the landscape for best practices, what people are doing, and then we tell people to go and execute it, and we sit back and watch the results. So I think this episode is one of those issues. It was one of those instances where we'll do that and we'll provide some key learnings. And the important thing is that the members and our companies go out and try to execute against those key learnings and see where it takes us.
Yeah, so let's get into it. Let's jump right in. What's the first thing we should talk about around sustainability, Matt?
Let's start where most people are operating in right now, and maybe we can deconstruct that, and then we'll move from there. But most people are operating in maybe a sustainable materials area, right? Yeah. And so as we think about sustainable materials, the key one that stands out the most is the Adidas plastic bottles, Ocean, Push, where they were doing, football, soccer jerseys and recycled Ocean plastic bottles. And they were doing shoes and recycled plastic bottles. Been doing this for a number of years. And so that's probably the key instance. But Andy, there are others that are out there. We talked about another episode about mushroom uppers. What are some of the things out there as it relates to recycled materials? And then how is that maybe not the holy grail as it relates to sustainable product?
Yeah, it's interesting because in some ways the material side is the easiest side for a brand, because your supplier is developing these things for you. So it's not like you yourself are having to optimize or go in or reconfigure your structure or come up with some new way of designing a shoe or a component or go into your factory and work with them to reduce waste, et cetera. Like this is actually, for a lot of people, it can be an easy win. And I don't mean that it's easy, but it's a lot easier to go to a supplier and say, I really want to cut out X% of, water waste, or I want to develop a new type of shoe that doesn't have any plastic in it. And it is up to that supplier then to help execute that. And so that's what Adidas really has done with Parlay. It's a company who's helping them collect the ocean waste hand in hand and work with them to develop materials around that. So I think, when we talk about materials, it's one of the biggest things that everybody's been talking about. But we talk about algae. So we know Bloom, we've interviewed, Bloom CEO in the past around making outsoles with algae and incorporating, the algae into that process. We've interviewed Stuart Jenkins in the past, where they're taking recycled foam and forming it into outsoles again. So recycling. Blue maca. So that, and again, to your point on mushrooms, pineapple, apples, all these different types of natural materials are or even sustainability around synthetics and things like that, where people are making new types of materials that stretch better, breathe better, perform better, and are produced better, chemically engineered a lot better. So around that stuff, materials are really interesting because that's what consumers interact with, from whether they look at it, feel it, touch it, put it on their feet. Is it comfortable? So it's a huge, important part of it. But I would say in terms of sustainability, where our industry is over the last 5 years, the suppliers of materials have been innovating and creating sustainability standards and processes for 25, 30 years.
Yeah.
So around materials, it's really interesting. And I think the broader point too is around Adidas has this goal to reduce plastics in their supply chain and their products. And you see other companies putting kind of a flag in the sand around programs similar where they're trying to strip something out. And during the week, I just interviewed Keen's sustainability lead, Chris Enlow, and he pointed out that they, instead of just going after one chemical in their product, they went out and stripped out a whole category of chemicals. And so I hope people will subscribe for the summit. It's a low cost. You go in and see all these different leaders talking about what they're doing, but they tackled their materials and their supply chain at a whole category level instead of just going onesie twosies. And it made a huge impact on their sustainability scores and just cleanliness of their product and the environment. So it's really interesting in that aspect. There's a lot of people who can help around that. So brands don't have to go it alone on the materials, but they do have to figure out where they're going to go, right? You can't just stretch yourself out thin saying, I want to do everything. It's really product specific, going after your core group and starting there and figuring out what materials you can integrate and make sure it still stays the same product, your classic product that you have.
Yeah.
It doesn't, but it enhances it in some way by using some new material. So that's kind of how I see that kind of conversation.
Yeah. And so as we pivot away from materials to maybe a less sexier side of the industry, but probably more impactful, to be honest with you, and that's design and development. And we've been pushing and pushing and pushing on digital design. But under the COVID environment, this has really pushed a lot of brands to the forefront to explore more digital tools and design and development and sampling than ever before. And so it's interesting how a crisis will socialize an initiative or a trend that hasn't picked up steam yet, and then something like COVID comes along and really propels it forward. And that's one of those silver linings in the dark cloud of the pandemic. And so, for example, talking to Mike Jeppesen during our sourcing summit, which you can access at shoesourcingsummit.com, we talked about the Merrill Spring 21 line, which was developed and is being presented with no samples, all digital renderings during the selection process and the selling process. And so that's a huge thing in my mind. And that cuts down on sampling. The average consumer has no idea how many samples are created that are never used. The shoes are never commercialized. And sometimes it's the same shoe with 15 different colorways for the upper. And so it's not really that different. It's just to help buyers visualize, retail buyers to visualize what the shoe looks like and then hold and feel it. And so pushing all that action and activity into the digital space cuts down a lot of sampling and the air freighting of product back and forth between Asia and the United States or European markets. And so in my mind, the more impactful way to get at sustainability and plant your flag, even if it's harder to describe and to quantify, is digitizing design and development.
Yeah, and I think you're dead on, because I think it does two things. And the challenge of the whole thing of people moving into the digital age, obviously we have a whole digital series. People go to fdra.org and see that there's a 3D education course we've set up with the Footwearists with Nicolene Van Enner that really goes through all the different software types, how you use it, set up workflow. It's a lot different than the physical way that what we've always done shoes. The challenge is the rub has always been someone's been doing it for 20 years, and it is difficult to transition to digital. And I always say, if you hear someone say that because that's the way we've always done it, that's the person you need to pull into your room and really say, look, man, we can't do it that way anymore. It just doesn't work. We can't get the margins We can't be sustainable. We can't deliver new product. Like, we've got to be innovative in this age. And in the same vein, the digital side, to your point, reduces sampling. So, what's really interesting is somebody will judge their shoe and say, oh, we did a carbon footprint of our shoe from factory. And what's really interesting, Matt, you just talked about this and it stuck in my mind was we're not factoring in all those additional samples to get that whole product line up and running. So to your point, it's like a sample for review. It's a sample for the sales guy. It's a sample in 12 different colors. It's all those things that also factor into the score of that one sneaker or one shoe that comes across into a person's hand. So we can score the shoe going through the factory and the material and shipping and going, but we should also add on top of that the whole process to get the development there. So that's what I think when you're talking about big wins and cutting out environmental waste and reducing our footprints, it is around that. It's around, digitally doing all the sampling that way. And the rendering is fantastic at this point. It's very lifelike. People like Deckers are already using their renderings to sell online. So some of the shoes they have online aren't actual product that they took a picture of. It's a digital rendering that they're using to test and measure and see people like it, make adjustments. So it actually sells. But also it's the component parts at the factory, meaning part of the biggest waste we have are quality defects. It's, the reason why we sample is because the factory's trying to learn how to make the shoe correctly and then magnify that and get the economy. So what happens is when you use something like a Roman's CAD, it does the pattern for you. It gives the pattern to the factory. And if they're already using, automated tools like cutting and things like that, then all of a sudden you're seeing less waste because the computer systems are telling you where to cut, how to cut, not having any waste of material after the fact is really the goal of the whole thing. So it's sampling, it's waste throughout the process, it's all those things. And I would also say just one extra thing to that too is designing out production touches, and that really is the key of knitted uppers. And I think that's probably one of the biggest innovations that we've seen. We don't talk about it in sustainable terms where we say it's a knitted upper. It's super cool. It's innovative. It's super comfortable, but it's actually really sustainable because you actually reduce touches on a product in the factory. You reduced a human holding the hand, moving it down the production line by creating something innovative and new to make the product. So when we think about design and development, it's designing out touches. It's designing out some of the materials or components that aren't really needed. It's making, in essence, sometimes simpler shoes. Sometimes we make things really complex that we don't need to. And all that is the innovation around it of figuring out a better way to make a shoe and then make sure the factory makes it without reducing touches, reducing the waste, reducing all those touch points. And that really does start back to the very beginning when you're designing out these materials. And to that point, one of the live webinars we're having is with the former design director at Timberland who does this. It's Nico Van Inner from the Footwear who focuses on circularity. It's Chris Hillier from Deckers, who's one of their innovation leads, who was also working on product at Sanuk around sustainable products and designing it. And then Jean-Marc Petitboy from Roman's CAD on this. We'll all be on there talking about these things, about how you actually do it. So we're talking about the ideas. The webinar as part of the series will actually tell you how to do it. So, which is good because obviously, again, just like we're being Bobs, the idea is important. The execution is the key.
That's right. That's right. So, all right. So as we move down our analysis as the industry consultants of the two Bobs, we went from materials to design development. Let's talk about just operations, and which is something that's not specific to footwear, but a company like Allbirds is really progressive in the way it measures its carbon footprint across operations, measuring even the commutes of their employees. And so they're a direct to consumer. They've built up brick and mortar retail since their launch and all their success, but they're clearly, particularly in a direct to consumer world, we are putting a lot more pressure using air freight and Amazon and cardboard. We're putting a lot more pressure on the environment in our society and the way we consume now. And that's not specific to Allbirds. That's everything. But I will say that as a company, they do a little bit different way. They have a more progressive way of measuring their overall impact. And so that's another area that some companies have planted their flag as an initiative for sustainability. And they're pointing more to the overall impact the business has to the environment, not necessarily focused on sustainable materials, although Allbirds is in other areas where we think sustainability can really take hold.
Yeah, and I mean, I think a lot of companies are. I think some of the leaders in the space, obviously, are the outdoor companies. So if you can think of Wolverine, Patagonia, Deckers, Keen, those kind of brands are really have been doing it for a long time because that's their consumer base is being thoughtful about the environment. But that's also a lot of their work has brought along a lot of other people, and so you see it in. When people are building new headquarters or offices, they're building it like LED standards. They're thinking about how they have solar panels. They're thinking about how they have less, how they arrange it to where maybe heating and cooling is done naturally versus, with air blasting. And even simple things to think about if you're owning retail space, how you close the doors during the summer so that the cold air doesn't get out. Little things like that, I think operationally are what people can look at and see. Recycling, obviously recycling things, at a factory, some of it's recycling the waste. And you can talk to that in a second, Matt, about, what we're doing in the factories, but operationally, like recycling water, how to use less water in molds and all those sorts of things. I also, when you think about your supply chains, obviously you're either flying something or you got something on a boat. But some of it's just optimizing your logistics so that packages have less stops, less layovers. If it goes to a warehouse, that's for D2C. Okay, then it doesn't need to transit again to another retailer. If you want to go to a retailer, make it go direct. So it's almost like stop having those layovers. No one likes layovers anyway. So what's your direct shipping line to reduce that? Programs to recollect shoes from consumers, whether you're going to give it to people like Souls for Souls.
Yeah, that's my next silo. That's my next segment.
And then the last, I would say like the last thing. So I teed up two things for you: the Shoe Waste and Souls for Souls. The last thing, and I think it's a major point, is optimizing your packaging. And what that is there's no reason for your shoes to have large gaps or space in the box. And there's no reason for the box to be packaged in another box that's going to have more gaps. And there's nothing more appalling than getting an Amazon box or any box with another box inside that's, 3 times as small as the box you got it in.
Right.
And then it's got the bubble wrap or the packaging. And then it just makes me sick to think about. And that really is, when you talk about margins, there's your margin right there of shipping a larger package by UPS, charged you more because the footage or the square inches or whatever it is. And it gets to a consumer and the consumer looks at it and they're like, why did you, it's a bad brand play. Like, why did you send this to me? Can you just ship the shoes in the one box? So packaging, I think, is key. We work with Billerud Norcus, if I said that right. And that's coarseness. And that's the one big thing they talk about is just like people just aren't optimizing their packaging and thinking about how they get it to the consumer. And then also whether the packaging can come back so that the consumer doesn't have to put it in another box because that box got damaged. So on the return side too, it's like you have to think about that whole process. But the packaging is key because before you even touch the shoe, you're touching the packaging and you think about the packaging before you even open the box. So that's a real simple win because, again, somebody else can help you do that. It's not like you have to do it yourself. There's experts who do that. So I'll get off that soapbox and I'll tee you up for kind of the shoe waste and the Souls for Souls side.
Yeah, I appreciate it. And yeah, there's no reason to ship air, people. Stop shipping air. It's costly. But as we look to things that are also costly, the shoe waste side is something that's really important to us. So we wanted to, as an organization, tackle or start a pilot program around shoe waste at the manufacturing level because we think there's a disconnect with kind of what we're saying publicly and what we're doing in recycled materials and all the stuff we want to do in sustainability. But if we're not going to China in particular, the biggest shoe producer in the world, and we're not educating factories on their ability to recycle their waste and then sell that waste off for profit, then we're not really kind of connecting the circularity of the process, right? It's kind of a dead end. And if we're not getting to the source of where shoes are made, then we're not doing anyone any favors. And so we started a pilot program last year with factories that supply Target, Steve Madden, and Fila. It is ongoing. We were throwing off our game a little bit because of the closing of COVID, but it's still a huge priority. In fact, we have regular calls about it. And we are, one, going into the factories and educating them on how to segregate waste appropriately, then connect with recyclers within their province, whether it's Fujian province or Guangdong province, and then helping them understand what they can make when they recycle and sell that material off to recyclers, so that we're keeping recycled materials and waste out of landfill, and we're pushing it into a system where in China there's more and more recyclers taking hold to ensure that all this waste gets moved and diverted and recycled in an appropriate way. And so what we're finding is that there should be no shock to this, there's a certain kind of maturation, if you will, or some factories are really good at it and we're already recycling and just needed help connecting, and some had no idea what the concept even was. And so we are spending a lot of time educating factories directly to ensure that this pilot program is successful. And then our plan is, particularly once we get kind of beyond the COVID environment, to start to really ramp up and broaden the program out and broaden it outside of China, because we do think there's strong ROI. And then the brands can really start to think more critically about how they engage and maybe even audit their factories in the areas of recyclability. And so that's what shoe waste is doing. And that's what we're really focused on. And I think it'll be, go ahead.
I should say we are posting for the Shoe Sustainability Digital Summit. You can go to, I think it's shoesustainabilitysummit.com to learn more about it. But we're posting the webinar that we did, the deep dive into all these learnings that Matt's talking about, into what we learned from the factory when we started it, how the program works and operates, and how brands can get involved. And every brand that we've talked to, there's a small cost to it, but because there's collective action, it's actually a lot less than if you did it on your own. And all of a sudden, you can adopt this program, and all of a sudden you've created a sustainability program at your factory that's already plug and play. So it's a huge win if you're trying to score yourself and you're trying to become more sustainable, to just adopt this program that FDA started for yourself. And then all of a sudden you look at your factories and you'll see the sustainability increase dramatically. And again, that in-depth webinar that Matt did along with Elevate Global, who's running the program, will be included, that you can watch and get deeper dives, as well as I think also the booklets that we've created. Correct, Matt?
That's right. Yeah, we created a handbook in both English and Chinese about how to recycle, how to separate and organize, and then connect with recyclers, and that will be available we'll drop those exclusively during the summit coming up. And I'm glad you raised the cost side, Andy, because what we're finding is so cost effective right now because of our collective action that even some of the brands are financing the entire thing on behalf of their factories. Some are also asking the factories to put up a little bit. And so there's some joint cost sharing, but it's not that expensive. And you get a multitude of days of professionals coming in and guiding you and helping you get organized and helping factories learn how to measure and track waste, which I think is so critical to combating. And you got to measure it to find success. And so we're seeing that in this program. The other thing that you brought up, I want to really focus on as well as we close out this discussion, is the fact of kind of what are you doing with end of life, or how are you extending the life of product? And there's several ways that you can do that. One is actually, particularly in a COVID environment where we have a lot of inventory and not a lot of places to put it, particularly in the spring, is diverting that product to organizations that can help distribute it in some way and give it out to those in need. And that's new product. And that's a company like Souls for Souls, or an organization like Souls for Souls does that. Now, what they also do is empower organizations like DSW to give outlets for consumers to bring in products, incentivize them to bring in their used shoes that also, again, extend the life of that product and keep them at a landfill. And I think to date, DSW has donated 3.6 million pairs based on their program of engaging with their consumers. And to me, it's just a really smart, if you want to round out your program and maybe do do, Andy, take a sampling of each of these silos we've talked about and start to build initiatives around each of them and organize them in that way. Consumer engagement, empowerment, and incentivizing, giving out DSW rewards for bringing in product, for example, is really cool because it's that you create a circular, sustainable initiative within your own company. And so you're building a broad initiative on circularity of product, and you're creating opportunities at each of these stops along the circular path to empower your employees, your factories, and your consumers. And to me, that's kind of the winning strategy, is how do you chip away at each of these initiatives?
Yeah. And, there's some people, we should say, when we talk about sustainability, there's different categories, different segments. So depending on the department you're working in, depending on the product that you have, obviously, if you're looking at low cost shoes sold in mass retail places, sustainability initiatives are much different for you than it would be for an athletic shoe company like Nike, who has money to innovate and wants to continue to create these unique products for their consumers. So it is different based on that. And the people we talk to at kind of the mass retail side that's making those low price point shoes really focus on the factory level. What can we do to reduce the waste and sustainability at the factory level? Like maybe I can't have a super sustainable material because it costs so much more, and you can't hide that in the cost like you could a $150 sneaker, but they can focus on that segment. And it really is about jumping in the stream, looking at where your pain points are, looking at your product, looking at where you are in the cycle, or in what department you're in, and really just going after it and figuring it out. And I think that's the kind of the key is, it doesn't matter what product you have. There's a place and a way to become more sustainable. It doesn't matter whether you've started or have been on this journey for a long time. People are still finding new ways to optimize. They're still finding new, and it's so critical because I always tell people the sustainability buzzword, where in the past it was like, oh well, it's sustainability, okay, like well we obviously want to be more sustainable, but sustainability is innovation at its essence. It is about optimization. It's about changing processes. It's about updating product. It's about making product better for the consumer. It's about making more valuable, adding value to the product as well in terms of comfort, durability, et cetera. So it kind of needs to go hand in hand of this idea that we have around sustainability is not just this for eco-friendly individuals who may go out hiking, but it's for everybody and it's for every part of our industry, that the optimization that we can create is not just an innovation story, it's a sustainability story, that we reduced our footprint. And if we can think about it hand in hand in innovation, then I think we can get rid of any stigma around sustainability and tie it into the innovation story and sustainability story. Because there are some people out there who still look at sustainability as kind of, a stigma around like granola people working on these things, and it's not. And it shouldn't be seen as that. But in this day and age, when we're talking about consumer shifts, behavior shifts, how we get product to consumers, what product they want, this all ties in. I mean, we've got to optimize every single thing that we do to make our margins these days. And part of that is all in on that. And again, for the summit, it's shoesustainabilitysummit.com. You can go in there and see, but we've got folks speaking from a number of brands, from Keen to Community Made. We've got Allbirds. We have VF. We have Teva, Reebok. We have Keds. We have Wolverine Worldwide. So the whole company, how you look at managing sustainability across brands. Rothy's. Just a number of, and then also just these experts that work on these issues, and the partners. So the packaging people, the ports, all these things that people don't think about, where sustainability can be a key component of what your supply chain is, are all included on that. It's $75. You can contact us for the discount code. It's $99 public. We'll give you a 25% off code if you email us, info@ftra.org. We'll give you that code. It's $75 flat to get all this content to learn how you build programs, or a bargain. Or if you already got the program set and you're working on stuff, how you do it a lot better. Leaders are really going to share, Decker's brands will be on here as well. So it behooves us to learn and listen and find those tips and best practices. But I can 100% tell you the folks that are sponsoring this event are the folks that you can go to almost immediately, and they'll tell you how to become more sustainable. It shouldn't be a heavy lift. You shouldn't be frustrated with it. Shouldn't be afraid of it. There's a huge opportunity, even with us, with the Shoe Waste program or with Souls for Souls. It's already built in. Part of it is just adopting and being willing to step into that. Right, Matt?
Yeah, it's so true, Andy. And I think that it's funny. You mentioned it, the stigma or maybe this view that it used to be granola folks. And it reminds me of the fact that the entire Davos conference earlier this year was focused on sustainable living, sustainable investing. And a lot of these, Goldman Sachs and others are really focusing in on, the companies that are more sustainable and driving that innovation, as you said. And so when it's hit Davos, it's no longer granola, right? It is corporatized, it is socialized, and it's here to stay. And I think the future is very exciting. And I think the summit itself will open folks' eyes to all the different things that are going on. And I think it's something that you got to get. If you don't got it, you got to get it. You got to get it.
I feel like more. Yeah, I feel like more and more we're consulting on this more and more with our members. We're helping people think about it. And to be honest, I work on this almost every day at this point in some facet of my day or around sustainability or helping people see things through or work with someone. And I don't even like granola. I don't eat granola. I'm not a fan of granola. So there you go. The alpha and the omega. Granola free in this household. So, well, actually, my kids eat granola, but not me. But with that, I think it's a good time to pivot towards Jasmine, who, what segment are we doing at this point, Jasmine?
What you got, what you getting? I tried to segue into it my last comment.
Took my shine, But yes, today we're doing what you got, what you getting. We kind of talked about some like recycled shoes last episode, but today I just kind of curious on what you got, what you're getting. My birthday's coming up, so I'll take all the shoes.
Me too.
Oh yes, Matt, you're before mine. Yes. Also, just thinking about Souls for Souls, last year for my birthday, I had like a shoe drive, and I think I might do the same thing this year, and people can kind of just drop them off so I don't have a big crowd, and I'll just leave a box outside.
That's awesome.
Yeah, but I totally forgot that I did that last year. It was a great turnout. I got shoes of all sizes, all styles, a lot of athletic shoes. So it was a great turnout. So I think I will do the same. So thanks for the reminder. And then 2, on your feet and what you're getting. For me, I'm wearing my slippers from Target today. And I am still on the hunt for some sustainable shoes, but I do think I'm going to get some of the Hugo Boss pineapple leaf fiber shoes.
Oh my gosh, that sounds awesome.
Wow. Matt, what you got? What you get?
Yeah.
All right, man. So I got to nerd out when I interviewed Eric Olson and Mary McNally from Crocs during our sourcing summit. Crocs is on fire. I got to nerd out my Batman Crocs and expose my nerdiness to the broader footwear community, which maybe I've already done on this podcast. But nevertheless, I got to show them on the video, which was awesome. So I'm constantly rocking my Batman Crocs, and they're unique because the upper on each of them, if that's what you call the upper of the Crocs, has a different image on it. So they're not the same across the board. And then I was reminded that same week that the KFC Crocs were dropping that smell like chicken. Yes. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's what I need. I think my dog will probably chew them up thinking it's real chicken, but I need some KFC Crocs. And it brings me back in a nostalgia way to Andy's fine idea of barbecue shoes. Yeah. And so anytime you can combine food with shoes is not a bad play. And
those are platforms. So you're going to be even taller than what you are now.
That I don't need. So.
Yeah, his hair won't clear his basement as it is where he is right now. Be careful. Duck down, buddy. I used to have shoes that smelled like chicken, but it was because I worked at Chick-fil-A and the grease would get all over my shoes. That's a whole different kind of shoe, I think. I don't think that's what Crocs is going for. That was a shoe you buy at Walmart and throw away after 2 months because the grease eats through the outsole. So
Right.
I don't think that's what they're going for. But my whole body smelled like chicken for days after working at a Chick-fil-A. Anyway, the biggest thing that I've seen that I'm really interested in, and I've got, Reebok's kind of corn shoe that they came up with. I'm really excited to see the collaboration between Allbirds and Adidas. Yeah. I've seen a lot of new product that's coming out that's really great. I've just seen really good product that is more thoughtful about the process in the factory, that's incorporating more sustainable materials where they're either completely recycled materials, like Teva's coming out with their straps that are almost completely recycled. All these sorts of things are really cool. One thing that is in the mail right now, being delivered to my house soon, I hope, is Sanuk came out with their new Sustaina sole. It's where they took the Blue Maca outsole that's recycled foam from all different types of shoes and made it into the outsole. And it's just a slip-on that they have, but the slip-on even in itself, it has recycled materials, and it's Deckers is basically saying this is the most sustainable shoe they've ever made. So wow. I'm super excited to get that, and I want to see how it feels and fits. And I had this really great conversation with Helix CEO. Helix is like a testing lab that takes final product and test out the durability and breathability of shoes and things like that. So I was talking to Jeffrey, and his interview is also with this summit. But he made a really good point to me about durability. And he said, really sustainability, we should think about it from a value perspective for the consumer. And we talked a little bit about that, but it really is about making sure that the consumer gets something, and it's not just something that's cool, like mushroom or pineapple, but when you put it on your foot, it's comfortable, it's lasting, it performs like you expect it to perform. Otherwise, they're going to ship it back to you. And how sustainable is that? So it really is around this idea of it's not just something that we're going to incorporate some kind of cool marketing message, but that marketing message better live up to the hype when you put it on your foot, or everything that you did to make it sustainable is all for naught. So that's kind of my parting thought. I don't comments on that. I welcome.
I agree.
Yeah.
Jasmine?
So
Jasmine, you tell me how those pineapple shoes are. How much are those, by the way? Are they like a pricey range? Are they like upscale shoes?
Yeah, a little pricey, but they definitely look comfortable.
You deserve it, Jasmine. Go for it.
And everybody needs they're just flat, just tie up shoes. So I just feel like they're easy going. They look breathable. I agree with you. Like if they don't feel comfortable, I don't want them. That's why I kind of stopped wearing heels, although I love them and I'll even still buy them, but kind of just buy them to look at them on the top of my closet. But I feel like I'm definitely on board with the comfort. Like that's most important to me. And if not, then it's just like, I won't say I will return them, but will they get much use? Maybe not.
Right.
Yeah.
Good points, folks. As we wrap up today, again, Sustainability Week is really trying to encourage people to think a little bit more eco-conscious about their processes, their product, even just turning off the light in your office if you're in the office on the way home, or if you're at your home, just turning off the light as you exit the basement as you go up for lunch, as I'm about to do.
Same here.
It's these little choices that we make every day that makes a big difference, and the little things lead to bigger things. So, Sustainability Week we're kind of putting a marker in the ground that this is a really important thing to our industry, not just for a multitude of reasons. It's good for the environment. It makes us feel good about doing good. It makes us feel good about giving really great product to consumer that we know is sustainable and that we know is innovative. But the reality of all this at the end of the day is sustainability drives a return on investment. So the money we're putting into these innovations will come back to us in optimization. Cha-ching! Is that a ding ding? All right. We're going to wrap it up. But again, shoesustainabilitysummit.com. You can go to FDRA.org to see that as well. It's super cheap. There's 20 plus pieces of content from all these leaders sharing their ideas and best practices, plus 3 to 4 live webinars where you can ask questions of industry leaders. There's nothing like it in the world. And every part of the revenue we get from this goes back to the Shoe Waste program. So your cost for the attendance is sustainable in itself, that we recirculate it back into the program to make the industry more sustainable. I don't know what else I can do to sell this. Please join us August 31st, the kickoff. And if you're hearing this just for the first time, the content lives on. So even if you miss Sustainability Week, you can still sign up to get all this content will live there for 4 to 6 months afterwards, and maybe even beyond, so you can still obtain that. So I've been talking a lot, and we again appreciate your listening to our podcast. Please share it out with colleagues and friends, get them to join, subscribe, drop us a line on ideas of shows you want to hear about. If you want to be a guest, drop us a line. We'd love to have you on and talk about your shoe story and your shoe product, and how your business operates. But with that, I'm going to tail off now, save my voice sustainably. And I want to thank Jasmine and Matt for their thoughtfulness, their continued thoughtfulness about sustainable issues and sharing ideas, and working as a cohesive unit as FDRA with brands and with suppliers to make the world a much more sustainable place. So thank you guys, and thanks everybody for listening. And until next time, Shoe In is out.
Shoe In has been brought to you by the FDRA, the Footwear Industries Association focused on retail, trade, politics, and fashion, helping create and enhance conversations on all things footwear. For information about FDRA, visit fdra.org.